every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity. And make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste, the therapist. Let's go. Every laugh, every smile.
All right. Hi, beautiful people. So if you've never been in here before, thank you so much for being here. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston, and I've been podcasting since 2018. And since the pandemic started, I decided to bring my podcast on video 5 days a week. So Monday through Friday, we get to hear from some amazing people that are doing things to empower other people. And the goal behind me doing this is to just help people kind of shift the way that they think. I know a lot of times we get pretty stuck in what we're feeling, and then we kind of find ourselves struggling. So before I bring on my special guest, I want to put up this crisis text line that I always put up. So one of the things that is happening now is sometimes you may find yourself struggling a little bit more because of the isolation. And with this crisis text line, it's a free crisis text line, 741-741. You can text and you can be connected to a crisis counselor so that you don't feel like you're alone. And I know one thing about texting, sometimes it's a lot easier than talking. Sometimes people are able to allow the thoughts to flow a little bit better when they are able to send a text. So that's something that is there. And then another thing that I found for people, because I know people listen to me from even outside of the US. This is Hope for Today. It's a nonprofit organization that was started by someone who lost people to suicide. And he started this organization where you can put in your country code and be connected with some resources in the country that you're from. And so his hope is that people have hope for today. His thing is like, if we can get through today, and sometimes it gets really hard. And so before it gets to the point of us finding ourselves struggling where we don't feel like we can move forward, I really want people to think about working on reaching out for support. And I know that can be like a hard thing to do. To kind of reach out for support, especially if you've never had to do that before. That can be really challenging. So today I have a special guest I'm gonna enter her into the stream, and I'm gonna have her introduce herself to you guys. Hello. Can you introduce yourself to my audience?
Hi, Celeste. Thank you. I love that you gave those opportunities for people to get help. That was really good.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. My name is Molly Howes. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been in practice in the Boston area for more than 35 years. And I'm still seeing people. Now I'm seeing people, meaning by telehealth or by phone. And the connections continue. Sometimes they seem more valuable. And I've also been working as a writer. So I recently completed a book that's coming out this year. And so that takes part of my time too.
Nice. How was the transition for you from, because you worked in the office, to telehealth? What was that transition like for you?
Well, at first, Zoom calls are really tiring.
Yeah.
So it's so strange. And I feel sort of trapped in a chair for hours on end. But it seems fine to me.
Okay, that's good. Now, what was the name of the book you just you just completed? A Good Apology, right?
A Good Apology: 4 Steps to Make Things Right.
What made you decide to write that book, A Good Apology? That's something, I think an apology is something that a lot of us struggle with making. I think our ego could get in the way. What made you decide to write this book called A Good Apology?
I think because I hate waste. I hate wastefulness. And I think people waste relationships. They lose connections um, that might be some people that they could keep, and they lose them unnecessarily because they don't know how to repair harm. They don't know how to fix things when stuff goes wrong. They don't know how to heal each other's hurt, and losing relationships is really costly. We know that relationships are good for us and they make us more satisfied with our lives and they make us more engaged in the world, but they also make us live longer and make us be healthier physically. So it's very, very costly to lose relationships. And on the other side, watching people be able to fix something that's gone wrong and create a new future together is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's very freeing, it's very relieving, it's remarkably effective.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing both of those things over a long time of working with couples, mostly, not only, um, made me a believer that this could be
That's no,
so.
that's really good. I know when I meet with people and they struggle with reaching out and they finally reach out and there's this apology, there's this freeing sense that people get and this sense of, man, I wish I had have done it earlier.
Yes,
Is that something that you found with people when they get to the point to apologize?
yes, it's very daunting. It seems really, really hard to do, and for good reasons,
Hmm.
um, which I talk about in the book. Some of them are hardwired. We're really bad at seeing our mistakes, for example. We just stink at it. We're really bad at it.
It's our
Just
ego.
perceptually, though, we don't
Hmm.
we don't see it. Um,
Hmm.
it's partly ego, but not only, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And there are all kinds of myths that make it hard to know that it's the right thing to do. Um, and then also, sometimes people feel so bad about having done something wrong. It's not like they're pretending they didn't do it wrong. They just feel so bad that they
Hmm.
get lost in shame and can't quite find enough acceptance of themselves to be able to
Mm.
face it responsibly.
Mm.
But once,
That's
once
true.
yeah, but once you do, it's not hard at all. I mean, it's kind of hard, but it's not very hard.
No, it's not. And I think the shame that you talk about that people have, a lot of times people may not recognize the shame and it may turn into anger
Yeah,
or seeing it differently, like they change their brain to make it seem as if it wasn't their fault and they start to believe that own perception that was created. But beneath all of that is kind of shame, which you just mentioned.
often is.
When you think about the pandemic now and what's taking place, are there any ways that you see this showing up with the pandemic in place?
Yeah. Um, I think there are three ways, maybe four, that the need for apologies comes up more now. And one of them
Hmm.
is if you're kept apart from someone and you're communicating in ways you don't usually communicate, and it's sort of awkward and hard, and something goes wrong and it doesn't get fixed, then what can happen is greater distance. It's sort
Hmm.
of easy to avoid fixing the thing, and it creates more sort of space between you. And then things can erode a bit. Um, and the other one is if you're stuck together and things are going wrong and you don't address them, then the tension builds, and everybody's a little on edge and irritable these days, I think. But
Hmm.
when you're with somebody a lot of the time, sometimes that person has the privilege of absorbing all your irritability, and it can kind of wear, right? So some stuff has to be addressed to get resolved. And the third way it comes up is lots of people are thinking about people they haven't seen for a long time,
Hmm.
like relationships that might have gotten lost, or um, just somebody they lost touch with. And people, I think, are reaching out, um, maybe to fix something that they weren't
Hmm.
able to fix a long time ago. Um, and sometimes, I guess the fourth thing is sometimes people are thinking about their own demise. or somebody else's. And it's a kind of a reckoning time to think about what you want to have addressed and fixed and resolved while you can.
With these ways that you just came up with, do you think that even though this is coming up, let's just say for people's thinking about their demise or like anything can happen, do you think most people it just kind of stays there and they don't know what to do about it? Like what would be the next step, especially if they've had this issue for so long that has never been addressed?
Yeah, I think we don't have very many models for how to go about this. And I guess that's, if I were going to give one take-home message, it would be, it's not the end of the story just because things went wrong. That doesn't have to be the end. You know, it's entirely possible to get another chapter and a better one.
Why does it feel like it's the end of the story for most people? Because I think when something happens, it does feel like, well, that's the end. Why do you think that feels that way for most people?
I think because we don't see people make repairs very well.
That's so
We don't
true.
witness it, and we're not taught how to do it. You know, kids, we were told as kids, say, I'm sorry. That'll fix it. You know, hardly ever fixes it.
No.
I mean, it kind of does a little bit, but not really.
But then as kids, it's different because we're not really as much tapped into our emotions as we are as we get older.
I don't know. I think you can teach kids some other ways to do it.
You can. What? Tell me some ways that you think we fail in doing that, because that's a good point you just brought up.
Yeah, and I just want to say I have complete sympathy for parenting, and I whatever I say as a recommendation is not because I did it right, because it's really hard to be a parent and to keep track of all that stuff, and nobody gets it all right. But one idea is, instead of saying these two magic words, I'm sorry, another way to think about it is both empathy for the person who's hurt and the idea of making something right, as opposed to erasing it or reversing it or something.
Yes.
How can you make something right that you've made wrong? Which is a very satisfying thing for a child too, to do, not for adults. Right?
Oh, that's good.
It's a different question.
Now, when I think about what you just said about these different ways that it's showing up, what are some steps that you would recommend for people to take in order to have a good apology? Before you answer that, Dr. Howe's review came out today. And in this review, it says that she argues that relationships are like contact sport. We frequently bang and bruise one another, often without meaning to cause harm. If we want to participate fully, we need to develop the skills to recover from the inevitable hurts and get back in the game, hopefully together. So that's pretty powerful. I like analogies so much. I think it helps us kind of conceptualize exactly what it is that we're trying to do. What are some ways that people can do this? Because you're right, we don't have the blueprint to trying to create a good apology.
Yeah. Well, the title of the book has 4 steps. I suggest that there are 4 steps. But even before you get to those 4 steps, I think the approach to the apology is an invitation, not a demand. The other person doesn't owe you the chance for you to make an apology. It's an opportunity for you that they might allow you to try to make an apology. And the goal isn't for them to give you forgiveness. The goal is for you to try to make it right to the extent that you can. It's a 2-party event, but it's kind of on you if you're the one whose behavior hurt somebody else. Not necessarily that you're to blame, but that what you did hurt somebody, whether you meant it. So the first step to saying I'm sorry doesn't mean saying anything. It's listening. And we're not always very good at listening, especially when there are feelings involved, you know. We're thinking about our point of view and we're busy, you know, making arguments up in our head. And as soon as the other person starts talking, we're debating them either in our heads or out loud. So the first step is to try to learn about the impact on the other person
Mm-hmm.
and understand how they feel. And that doesn't have anything to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with what you did, what you thought you did. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you meant it. It doesn't have to do with what kind of person you are. It's just about the impact on the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to get sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to inquire and listen for lots of reasons, that we could talk about more if we wanted. But it's harder to be receptive than it is to take an action for many of us.
Mm-hmm. So that's the first step. What would you say the second step is?
The second step is more like what we usually think of when we think of saying I'm sorry. It's making a sincere and empathic statement of responsibility. I see what I did. I see how it affected you. And I am really sorry. It doesn't have to include the words I'm sorry, but
Okay.
it could be in there.
Now, before I get to the next step, making a sincere, empathetic statement, by the time you get to the step, are you able to see it from their point of view, or are you just saying it to say it?
Well, that's what step one is for, right? Is so you
Okay.
saying. And people sometimes apologize for the wrong thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? They don't know what really bothered the other person or hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
And they, like Louis C.K., he was accused of all that sexual misconduct. The first thing he did was apologize to the wrong woman for the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He hadn't listened yet.
Mm-hmm.
You have to listen first so you know what you're trying to address. And when you're taking responsibility, you're not saying I'm to blame. I'm bad, or I'm faulty or something like that. You're just saying my behavior had this impact on you and I see it,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not I meant it to.
Okay. So now we're listening, we're making an empathic statement, and we're able to make this empathic statement because we've listened to what they said.
Yeah.
Then what would we do next?
The third step is that one, sort of like what I was saying about the kids, it's making it right. It's making restitution or reparations
Mm-hmm.
for something that you cost the other person.
Mm-hmm.
So in a legal setting, that would be making the other party whole, which usually means financially whole, like return them to their original state. So that's kind of the framework, but in personal relationships, it's usually not material. It's not financial. I mean, sometimes it's partly that. It could be a material thing that's symbolic as opposed to about its monetary value.
Mm-hmm.
Replacing something that was damaged or lost or something. And it could also be, very commonly, is a do-over. Taking another try for something that you ruined for somebody. Because you forgot to show up, or because you were so late that you missed the important part, or because you made the person who was going to something so late that they couldn't do it, or if you hurt somebody. A friend of mine forgot her husband's birthday, and the kids, the whole family forgot his birthday, and he was kind of grumpy about it that night. And she said, "What's with you? Why are you being so difficult? I've had a hard day." And so he told her, and she felt terrible. And so the next week, every single day, the kids gave him, she gave him like his favorite snacks and surprise presents and surprise little adventures, and every single day. So it was his favorite birthday ever. And he often tells the story about how it was a really fun week for the whole family. And it was better even than it would have been the first time, because it sort of the reparations included the thing that was lost first, and people learning about it and caring about him. So that kind of do-overs, and people think it's sort of corny and awkward, and it is, but it can be surprisingly powerful.
I think that's so true.
And on a larger scale, the conversation about reparations is in the air, right? It comes up not often enough, but periodically in Congress. What are we going to do about the original American sins? Are we going to make up for these things, and how might we do it? And the discussions are very interesting about what would count as sufficient reparations, right? And that's largely financial, but it's a really important discussion.
And this is a discussion that we would make with the party that we offended, right? We would kind of figure this out with them together.
Exactly. This is an example of where you could make up for the wrong thing, right? You could give somebody, well, I don't. Georgetown University sold a number of enslaved people to Louisiana, and that's how they were able to survive. And
that's how they were able to survive
when they did it, which was 200.
Okay, yep.
And so as a part of making reparations for that, they had a big study group and instituted some changes and started a program and named a building after somebody who had been enslaved. And but they didn't consult the descendants. I mean, they did really good things and they were really trying, but they didn't ask the people. And that was a drawback, right? So then another more complicated conversation had to happen. All these rules, all these steps do apply on any scale.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what would our last step be to this whole idea of a good apology?
Can you guess?
Like, how do we move forward? Or if they want to move forward, maybe not how.
Yeah, it's about the future. It's about how do you make sure it doesn't happen, right? Because why would I believe you if things are the same conditions that produce this first problem?
Yeah.
If it's a big thing or a thing that has happened before, there's no reason to suppose that it's going to change just because of the intention to change it. I mean, that's powerful, but it often isn't enough in behavior change,
Yes.
People need supportive systems. They need incentives built in or structures or something, right? So what are you going to do to make sure that you can convincingly say this will not happen again?
No, this is good. And I think like for me growing up, I think I accepted apologies more than changed behavior. What would you say to somebody on the other end? I know this isn't about a good apology for the person trying to make the apology, but for the victim, for the lack of a better word, what would you say to them in regards to accepting apology?
Yeah, well, I think timing is really important because sometimes you're not ready to receive it. Sometimes you're too hurt or mad. But often, if you can see that the person is sincere, you appreciate what they're trying to do. And so you want to be open to it. And I think the mistake that people make sometimes on the receiving end is receiving it before they're ready because they're grateful for the person trying. And I would say it's a good idea to actually listen to yourself and see when you're ready and how much time you need and how many repetitions you need. If the injury is big, like after infidelity, it takes a while. It takes a lot of going over it. And it behooves the person who's receiving it to be honest with themselves about what they actually need so that when they get to the other end, they're really done.
Yeah. And for people, one of the things I deal with people struggle with substance abuse and have come clean. And one of the things that some people struggle with is their behavior has changed and they are trying to make amends.
Yeah.
And I'm having a conversation that a lot of damage has been done and they may not be at a place to accept it. When you think about a good apology, and I'm sure this is going to be in the book that you wrote, but what are some things people should think about prior to making that apology so that they're not going off of the fact that once I do these 4 steps, things are going to be back to normal, going with our future. What kind of things would you say about that?
I'd say be patient.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good apology takes so much courage,
Mm-hmm.
but it also takes humbleness. It takes curiosity about the other person and focus on the other person and keeping your own stuff kind of at bay for a while. Now, another problem that comes up, which is a little different than the one you asked about, is in an ongoing relationship, usually both people are hurt periodically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes one person is hurt because the other person was hurt first and did something. They're really reacting to each other. And oh, who's this nice person who says these things? These messages that come up on here, I like that. So if you're hurt too, one sense you have is that you don't have to apologize because you're hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're the one who's hurt. Well, usually both people are. So if you're going to get an apology, the best way to get it might be to start with figuring out what you might have done to hurt the other person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the case, but it might be that. And sometimes nobody will be the one that apologizes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, everybody stays hurt, which is kind of wasteful. Again, wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're willing to be the first one, then you just have to put your stuff aside for a while and take turns, which it's hard when you're hurt to be patient like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's when a therapist can help.
Mm-hmm.
The therapist will say, I promise you we'll get to you. You'll get a turn.
No, that's good. And I think that sitting with yourself and knowing that these steps, whether you are receiving an apology or the one making the apology, may not feel good or feel like the norm, especially if it's not an environment or a system you are accustomed to. But it sounds like, say that again.
I don't think anybody's accustomed to it. I think it's very strange.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like from what you're saying, there's a lot of healing and restorative relationships that can happen through this process.
It's interesting that you use the word restorative too, because this model of apology also tracks the same pattern as restorative justice does, where it's not about punishment as much as it is about restoring trust.
It feels like it when you went through it. It just feels like a restored relationship, because I think we only have one life, and when people are hurt and don't know how to say it or don't know how to apologize, I think that there's so much time wasted. And I think with this book, people can really learn how to do things differently.
I hope so. Yeah.
Somebody wants to know, so this is the book, A Good Apology. Someone says, is the book on Amazon Audible?
It will be.
Yeah. Are you reading it, Dr.
Yeah,
House?
I hope so. I was supposed to read it this spring, but I couldn't go to the studio because we weren't allowed to go anywhere,
Oh, okay.
So, but now that the book has been delayed a little bit, I think I may still get a chance to do it. But if I don't do it, some actor will do it who has a studio at home.
Okay. So it's, because I'm an Audible girl. I'm going to make sure.
Yeah. I hope so.
But if you want to pre-order the book, you can do that. It's going to be anywhere books are sold. You can pre-order the book now. This is the book. And I think it's amazing that you decided to do this. It's these little things that people don't really think about that affects us. Like apology, who would think like a lack of an apology can really affect my life? But it does have a lot of downfalls to holding on to shame or pain. And this is one way.
Yeah, I think so. Everybody's got a story of a bad apology,
Mhm.
or or when it didn't happen. That was either that they did badly or that was done badly to them. Everybody's got
It's so
that.
true. So true. Is there anything else you think would be beneficial to my audience before we go?
I think I think compassion for yourself is a really important part of doing this work. Um,
Mhm.
Compassion for the other person clearly, but
Mhm.
for yourself too, because it's a hard thing to do and
It's
it's responsible and it's a sort of a moral imperative in a way to make something right if you've made it wrong, even by accident. And so the more you can be compassionate to yourself and appreciate the effort that you're making to take these steps, um, the kinder you can be to yourself about it, I think is important.
I just got one more question now that you said that. What about forgiving yourself for
Yeah,
the person that's making the apology? That because the compassion is huge.
yeah.
Is that part of the process too of the people that are making the apology?
I hope so, because you can't depend on the other person to do that for you.
Hmm.
You got to come to terms yourself, I think. Sometimes the
Hmm.
other person can't,
Hmm.
and sometimes the other person isn't available to you anymore, and you've still got to do some version of this process.
Ah, okay, and I'm assuming all of that is in the book.
Yeah. Really good. Read
This
the book, that's right.
I gotta read the book because now I keep having more and more questions. But we're gonna go through the whole book if I keep going on.
There's a lot of pages in there, it's okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. House. I really appreciate you making space to be here. This was amazing, and I know people are going to benefit from hearing about this concept.
Thank you so much. I'm
All right.
delightful to be here with you.
Yay! Thank you so much. All right, bye.
See you. Bye.
All right, so that was amazing. I'm so glad that she came on to do this, especially now. I think one of the things she wanted me to make sure I brought up was the ways that this is coming up during the pandemic. I never would have thought of that. I never would have thought about this process that people are going through during the pandemic. And so I think that if that's something that you are dealing with, definitely like thinking about these steps that she talked about doing. And I love the fact that at the end she talked about this idea of having compassion on yourself because you are human, and we make mistakes, and so the compassion, I think, it gave me chills when she said it because I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking about the other person that's getting the apology, but the person that has to give the apology as well is maybe struggling too. So that was amazing. That's why I love having these experts come on because I learn something new every time that I have these conversations with people. And I feel like it's allowing people to kind of shift the way that they think about things. So that's important. Before we go, I just kind of want to put up this crisis text line for people that may have joined at the end. 741-741. This is something that you can text for free. I have so much compassion. My biggest thing yes, it is. Yes, you're right. I have so much compassion for people when it comes to mental health. And I think, when this quarantine first started, we talked a lot about washing our hands and staying physically safe, but not enough about the mental health struggles that people were going to be going through. And, that's why I decided to come on. Because like my heart breaks for people that are kind of doing this alone. And, one of the things Dr. Howe said at the beginning, if you missed the beginning, and don't forget, you can catch this on the podcast, but one of the things she said on the beginning is about us, needing community, needing relationship, and not doing this alone. And obviously when relationships are going through some kind of struggle, and people struggle with, making amends, you kind of, it's isolating feeling. And then, now a lot of people are feeling isolating. I know we're seeing like social distance, but it's more physical distance, and just kind of being creative about the ways that you can work on communicating with people, because we can still communicate. We just can't physically be in each other's presence. But just know, like, you're not alone. There's always there's support. It may not be immediately in front of you, but there are some systems. So I definitely want people to like reach out for support if they need it. So I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for rocking out with me. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, another guest. If you want to be a guest on the show or know of someone that would love to be on, let me know. May is, I think I have like 4 spots left for May. May's almost completely full, but I would love to have you on, because I love sharing and highlighting people that are doing amazing things to empower other people. You can follow me on all social media platforms. Oh, also, I almost forgot, there's this free wellness will assessment that I created. So if you go on CelesteTheTherapist.com, you will be able to click on this assessment. So I created this assessment for people that may be struggling. And a lot of times when we get to this place of struggling, we don't know where to start. And so this is a tool that I like to use with clients to help them kind of pinpoint the areas that they're struggling in. Because sometimes there's some areas that we're not doing too bad in, and it feels like everything's falling apart. We'll tell ourselves like, oh my gosh, everything's falling apart, when maybe, in my like social life and physical, I'm doing well, but maybe my financial and emotional is not so good. And then trying to give ourselves a starting point as to where we can start to work on these issues. So if you go to CelesteTheTherapist.com, you can find that course for free. So I will talk to you guys tomorrow.
Every laugh, every smile, every hug, every kiss, every touch, every person in my life that I care about and love. But wait, maybe I'm getting too emotional. That's exactly what they say you ain't supposed to do. Suppress your feelings, never talk about your pain. Can't appreciate the sun without acknowledging it rains, right? That's right. So this a moment of clarity, and make sure you always protect your energy. You stay focused and your life gon' be lit. And you are now rocking with Celeste the Therapist. Let's go.